I'm Margaret West-Burnham and I am Company Secretary for the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. My role is to make sure that we remain compliant with all our external regulators and to manage the internal governance of the Institute to ensure that it operates effectively. I also deal with disciplinary issues in terms of maintaining our professional standards.
My name is Deborah Harding. I'm the Managing Director of the Market Research Society. MRS originally was set up in 1946 and was as a professional body. In 1954 we took over the regulatory function. Less than 10 years ago we also took over the trade association role, so we represent organisations whose business is to supply research services. So we literally do all three of the key functions: individuals, companies and regulation.
I'm Helen Whiteman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for CILEx Regulation. CILEx Regulation is a subsidiary company of CILEx, which is the Chartered Institute of Legal Executives. CILEx is an approved regulator under the Legal Services Act 2007.
I think in terms of maintaining our professional standards, one of the most important tools that we have at our disposal is the ability to keep reminding our members of the standards they're expected to adhere to. The way we do this is through their annual membership renewal process. At each renewal, members have to recommit to our professional code of conduct. It's very easy when members join an institute to sign that code of conduct on day one, put it in a drawer and forget all about it. We want it to be front of mind to members. Also now, for our new chartered status that we're offering to qualified members, in addition to re-signing the code of conduct, they now have to complete an online ethics test, which we believe is an incredibly important part of being a procurement professional. We do encourage whistleblowing. Complaints are always treated very seriously, and we have a disciplinary committee which will review any complaints received against members.
Continuous professional development, keeping up to date with what's going on is clearly important. I think also it's getting people to really engage with the topic, so presenting it in a way which makes them interested, but also makes them query and consider the aspects from all angles, because that will help them in terms of understanding. We provide an advisory service called Codeline, which is primarily to help our members understand what their code obligations as a regulator, but we also sort of advise them on broader issues like data protection and some of the telephone regulations, all these things that affect their sort of working lives. And that's a very lively service. We get over 500 queries a year, which is good, because it means that actually we'd much rather somebody asked us a question first than actually did something wrong and then we have to investigate it in a disciplinary or regulatory context. So it's also thinking about different ways of communicating professional standards issues. So it might be small 10 minutes webinars, it could be through roadshows, actually going around and talking to people in their businesses or at regional events. It's those kinds of things. I think you have to have multiple touch points.
There are four key areas that I think are important for maintaining professional standards, the first of which is about setting standards. So here's one I prepared earlier. This is the CILEx Code of Conduct. In here, every person who registers with CILEx as a member, if it's the first time that they've registered with us, is pointed to the CILEx Code of Conduct. We combine the Code of Conduct with educational requirements that are required of CILEx members and others. We introduced a new CPD scheme where everyone who's regulated must achieve at least 9 CPD outcomes, and one of those CPD outcomes must focus on professionalism. What does professionalism mean? Well, it's open to interpretation. It could be something around ethics. It could be, for example, equality and diversity. We took a view that there wasn't a great deal of future in a CPD scheme which really was based on an hours system. So you would find members of the profession could go along to a day's training, tick a box to say, yes, we've done 7 hours of CPD today, but there was no informing that choice of course, other than I know I've got to complete X number of hours this year, therefore I'll go on this property course or probate course. It would be fair to say that I think some of the community have found that challenging.
The key challenges for my particular role are making sure that the whole organisation understands the importance of regulatory compliance and of the standards that we work to. Getting that message across an international organisation is particularly challenging. It can be a real challenge to enforce the code outside the UK. It's really in the developing economies where we have a very large proportion of student members seeking to complete their qualifications. I'm particularly thinking of countries which have high corruption indexes, where it's absolutely the business norm to operate within bribery and corruption. We had a recent incident ourselves where we were sending out some examination papers for some study centres in Africa. The examination papers were held at customs and we were asked to pay a bribe to release them to the study centre. We didn't do that, but it just gives you an idea of the kind of challenges that our members face on a daily basis. If they are in a situation where they're about to lose their job, if they refuse to complete a piece of contractual work because of the nature of the organisation they work in, if that is then discovered, they would have a degree of protection for having told us about it and having completed the ethics training. So we can say they understand the implications of the ethics training, but they're in a situation where they would be in harm's way.
I think the most effective way of deterring unprofessional behaviour is being very clear at the outset what the expectations are in terms of the standards that you're setting, the risk perhaps that an individual might pose. It's having very clear messages out there about what we as the regulator expect, the competencies that you would be required to demonstrate as being competent to act in your area of practice, and it's also having the framework, the mechanisms in place of various committees, and also being open and transparent where things have gone wrong. We publish that in our CILEx's journal magazines. Unfortunately, we have to follow a certain line and they may be removed from the membership.
I would say the most effective way of deterring unprofessional behaviour is to name and shame when breaches are actually detected, to publicise more frequently and more vociferously what you're doing to maintain standards, and to be absolutely clear that certain kinds of behaviour will not be tolerated by a professional body. It's very important for us that people doing procurement are trusted and that they have the confidence of the public that they're doing a good job. And the only way you can do that is to demonstrate that you do hold people to account and that you will get rid of people who are not following the right standards. We believe that we are being quite successful in raising professional standards because we're seeing an increasing demand from employers, particularly government, for fully qualified members to be in senior procurement positions. The recent introduction of our new online ethics test and the take-up that has seen is another way of demonstrating to ourselves that we are going in the right direction. It can be quite challenging to actually make life more difficult for your members by making the entry standards more difficult, by making maintenance of membership more onerous. But we believe it's the right thing to do to continually raise that threshold. It's very difficult to say how you would measure success in these fields. It certainly wouldn't be in terms of the volume of cases that we deal with. We have relatively few complaints to deal with each year. When we do have them, they tend to be fairly significant ones. But what we tend to do, rather than talk about the numbers of people that we discipline, is reiterate the importance of following the code of conduct, that it's held there as, if you like, a threat of this is what will happen if you breach the code of conduct.
The way that we measure this is through statistics, and if I just give you some figures here, on average we receive about 40 misconduct complaints a year for a regulated community of 20,000 individuals. I think that's pretty good. It's quite a good compliance record. We also surveyed last year our regulated community to find out about any complaints that their firm might have dealt with. So a lot of the regulated community are already working in a regulated environment in another entity, for example a solicitor's practice or in-house or local government. And last year there were 194 complaints made to law firms about the service provided by our regulated community.
We undertake an annual review every year, which is our report to our members, which tells them the activities in the year. But a standard part of that will be reporting on complaints in terms of not only which ones we've upheld and so on, but also the kind of topics, the issues that we've looked at. But we also report on the number of queries we've had, the types of queries we've had, and so on. And that, if you like, provides a yearly benchmark of how we're doing, and we sort of track that that over time to see if there are any significant trends.